The unseen threat. The Resolute glided silently through the void of space, its matte black hull reflecting the faint light of a distant star. Commander Alaric Dane stood on the bridge, his piercing cybernetic eye scanning the holographic display that floated in the air before him. His crew moved with disciplined efficiency, their collective focus centered on the faint distress signal pulsing through the ship's systems. "Commander," said Lieutenant Oren Voss, a wiry alien with translucent skin that shimmered under the dim bridge lights, "we've triangulated the source of the signal. It's coming from the Vega 12 colony, Allied territory." Alaric nodded, his jaw tightening. "What do we know about the colony?" Oren hesitated. "Mostly agricultural, minimal defenses. Last report indicated a population of around 15,000, primarily Yilleran settlers." The mention of the Yilleran stirred a pang of unease in Alaric. The amphibious alien species had been some of humanity's staunchest allies during the initial years of galactic expansion. Losing them to an attack was not just a tactical loss, it was a betrayal of trust. "Set course for Vega 12, Alaric ordered. "Full speed. If anyone is still alive, we'll get them out." As the crew sprang into action, Alaric turned to the ship's communications officer, a young human named Layla Grant. "Put out a wideband warning to the Alliance. If this is the Mirrodon swarm, we need every Allied ship on high alert." Layla's fingers danced across the console. "Message sent, sir." The name hung heavy in the air. Mirrodon swarm, a hive mind species infamous for their relentless consumption of organic life. The swarm had been a shadow on the galaxy's edge for decades. Alaric had faced them once before, on a distant frontier planet, where survival had hinged on adapting to an environment so hostile it was nicknamed Hell's Cradle. That experience had left him scared in more ways than one, but it had also forged him into the unflinching leader he was now. The Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the crew collectively gasped at the scene before them. Vega 12 hung in space, its once thriving fields and cities now blackened wastelands. The planet's orbital defenses were in ruins, their debris forming a floating graveyard around the colony. "Life signs?" Alaric asked, his voice a low growl. Oren worked quickly, his translucent hands blurring over his console. "Faint readings. Underground. Less than 200. No Mirrodon ships in the area, but we're detecting biosignatures on the surface." Alaric's cybernetic arm whirred softly as he clenched his fist. "Prepare a dropship. We're going down." The colony was eerily silent as the dropship touched down. Alaric and his team disembarked, their weapons raised and their senses sharp. The air was thick with the acrid stench of charred vegetation, and something more insidious, a sickly sweet smell that clung to the back of the throat. "Stay close," Alaric instructed, his voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. "We don't know what's still out here." The team moved cautiously through the ruins, the sounds of their footsteps muffled by the ash-covered ground. They found the entrance to an underground shelter hidden beneath a collapsed building. Inside, a group of Yilleran survivors huddled together, their wide, amphibious eyes filled with fear and desperation. "You're safe now," Alaric assured them. "We're here to get you out." One of the survivors, an elderly Yilleran with mottled green skin, stepped forward. "It was the swarm," she said, her voice trembling. "They took experiments. Took some of us." Alaric's blood ran cold. The Mirrodon swarm's reputation for genetic experimentation was well documented but rarely witnessed. The survivors' accounts painted a grim picture of abductions, dissection, and unnatural fusion of species. "Commander," Oren's voice crackled over the comm. "We have company topside. Multiple biosignatures converging on your position." Alaric turned to his team. "Time to move. Get these people to the dropship. Now." The surface was a nightmare of chittering shadows and predatory eyes. The Mirrodon drones moved like a single organism, their sleek black carapaces glinting under the weak sunlight. Alaric led the defense, his cybernetic arm deploying an energy shield that deflected the swarm's acidic projectiles. "Hold the line." he barked, his team forming a protective barrier around the survivors. A Miraidon drone lunged at Alaric, its serrated limbs aiming for his throat. He caught it mid-air, his enhanced strength crushing its exoskeleton with a sickening crunch. The creature's hive-mind scream echoed through the air, rallying the others into a frenzy. "Commander," Layla's voice called out from the dropship. "The survivors are on board. We need to go." Alaric fired one last shot into the mass of drones before retreating to the ship. As the ramp closed, he caught sight of a larger figure emerging from the shadows, a Miraidon emissary, its elongated form towering over the drones. Its multifaceted eyes locked onto Alaric, and though it spoke no words, the message was clear. This is only the beginning. Back on the Resolute, Alaric stood in the war room, his cybernetic eye replaying the events of Vega 12. The Miraidon emissary's presence haunted him. It wasn't just an attack. It was a statement. "Commander," Layla said hesitantly, breaking his train of thought, "we've intercepted a transmission from the Alliance. They're calling for a meeting to discuss the swarm." Alaric nodded, his expression grim. "Good. It's time they understood what we're up against." As the Resolute set course for the Alliance's central hub, Alaric stared out the viewport, his mind racing. The galaxy had grown complacent, lulled into a false sense of security. But he knew better. The Miraidon swarm wasn't just a threat to Vega 12 or humanity. It was a threat to all life. And if the Alliance couldn't see that, then he'd make them see. The cold rage awakens. The Resolute cruised toward the central hub of the Galactic Alliance, a sprawling station that orbited a binary star system. The station gleamed with the collaborative efforts of dozens of species. Sleek Yilleran architecture blended seamlessly with the towering crystalline spires of the Malgaran and the industrial functionality of the Garruk. Yet, as Commander Alaric Dane stepped into the meeting chamber, the atmosphere was far from harmonious. Representatives from various species filled the room, their voices a cacophony of arguments and accusations. Holographic displays of the Vega 12 massacre played on repeat, the images of destruction doing little to unify the assembly. Alaric strode to the center of the chamber, his cybernetic eye glinting ominously. "Enough," he bellowed, his voice slicing through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent as every representative turned to face him. Alaric let the silence linger for a moment before speaking again. "We've all seen what the Miraidon swarm is capable of. Vega 12 was not an isolated attack. It was a warning, and if we don't act now, it will be the first of many." The Malgaran delegate, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like chimes, spoke up. "Commander Dane, the Alliance has protocols. We cannot act hastily. To launch an offensive without comprehensive planning would be reckless." "Reckless." Alaric's tone dripped with disdain. "Reckless is waiting for the swarm to pick us apart one colony at a time. They don't negotiate. They don't stop. They consume. If you think protocols will save you, then you're already dead." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. The Yilleran ambassador, a slender figure with shimmering green skin, rose to speak. "Commander Dane is correct. We saw what the swarm did to Vega 12. They took my people, not just to kill, but to experiment, to twist them into something unnatural. We cannot let this happen again." Despite her support, several other delegates hesitated, their fear of retaliation outweighing their resolve. Alaric's patience thinned. He stepped forward, his cybernetic arm slamming onto the central table with a resounding thud. "We don't have time for your fear," he growled. "I've seen what the swarm can do. I've fought them, and I'll fight them again, with or without your help." Back aboard the Resolute, Alaric's cold rage simmered. The Alliance's indecision felt like a betrayal, not just to humanity, but to every life the Miraidon swarm had taken. He retreated to his quarters, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. The room was sparse, its only decoration a tattered flag from his time on Hell's Cradle. The memories of that brutal planet resurfaced unbidden. The relentless Miraidon assaults, the nights spent huddled in freezing rain, and the friends he had lost. his hand clenched into a fist, the servos in his cybernetic arm whirring softly. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he said, his voice curt. Lieutenant Oren Voss stepped inside, his translucent skin casting faint reflections on the walls. "Commander, the crew's ready for whatever comes next, but they're worried about the Alliance. If they don't support us." "They won't," Alaric interjected. "Not in time. But we'll move forward anyway." Oren hesitated. "What are you planning?" Alaric's cybernetic eye glowed faintly as he spoke. "We're going to hit the swarm where it hurts." The crew of the Resolute worked tirelessly to prepare for the mission. The Deathworld, known only as Korath's Maw, was a place of legend, a planet so hostile that even the Myriad... A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he said without looking up. Lieutenant Oren Voss stepped inside, his translucent skin catching the dim light. "Commander, we've received a message from the Alliance Council. They're calling an emergency session to discuss our actions." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Let me guess, they're not happy." Oren hesitated. "They're concerned. The destruction of the Miradon facility was a tactical success, but some view it as an unauthorized act of aggression. They fear it might provoke the swarm into targeting Alliance worlds." Alaric rose from his chair, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. "The swarm doesn't need provocation. They're coming whether the Alliance likes it or not. If they want to play politics, fine. But I'm not letting them sit on their hands while the galaxy burns." The Alliance Council chamber was packed with delegates from dozens of species, their holographic images flickering above their respective podiums. Alaric stood in the center, his every movement scrutinized by the gathered assembly. The Malgaran delegate, a crystalline being whose voice resonated like chimes, was the first to speak. "Commander Dane, your mission to Korath's Maw has caused significant unease among the Alliance. While your actions were undeniably bold, they were also unilateral. This council exists to ensure coordinated efforts against the Miradon swarm." Alaric's cybernetic eye glinted as he replied, his voice cold and measured. "With all due respect, this council has spent more time debating than acting. Meanwhile, the swarm is growing stronger. Vega 12 is gone. Korath's Maw was just one of many breeding grounds. How many more colonies need to fall before you take decisive action?" The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some supporting Alaric, others condemning his defiance. The Yildiran ambassador, one of humanity's few steadfast allies, spoke up. "Commander Dane is right," she said, her amphibious features calm but resolute. "The swarm will not wait for us to organize. If we fail to act now, we risk losing everything." Despite her support, opposition remained. The Tharn representative, a bulky reptilian creature, growled in disapproval. "Your actions risk drawing the swarm's wrath upon us all. We must fortify our defenses, not launch reckless attacks." Alaric's patience wore thin. "Fortify your defenses. Against what? The swarm isn't a storm you can weather. It's a flood that will drown us all unless we take the fight to them." Back aboard the Resolute, Alaric's frustration boiled over. The Alliance was fractured, its members too divided by fear and self-interest to see the bigger picture. He gathered his senior officers in the war room, the tension in the air palpable. "We can't rely on the Alliance," he began, his tone firm. "They're too busy arguing to see the threat staring them in the face. If we wait for them to act, it'll be too late." Layla Grant, the ship's communications officer, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Commander?" Alaric's gaze swept over the room, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly. "We form our own task force. Volunteers only. Humans, Yildiran, Malgarans, anyone willing to fight. We hit the swarm where it hurts and keep hitting them until they can't recover." Dran, the hulking Garrick engineer, rumbled his approval. "I'm in. The Alliance can argue all they want. I'd rather die fighting than hiding." The others nodded, their determination mirroring Alaric's. The decision was unanimous. Recruiting volunteers proved easier than expected. Word of the Resolute's mission to Korath's Maw had spread, inspiring hope among those who had lost faith in the Alliance. Ships from various species joined the growing fleet, each one carrying brave souls ready to stand against the swarm. Among the new recruits was Callan Rin, a skilled pilot from the Malgaran system. Her crystalline wings shimmered as she introduced herself to Alaric. "I've seen what the swarm can do," she said. "They took my family. I won't let them take anyone else." Alaric nodded. "Welcome to the fight." As the fleet assembled, Alaric worked tirelessly to coordinate their efforts. He knew the odds were against them, outnumbered, outgunned, and operating without the Alliance's support. But the resolve of his team gave him hope. Their first target was a swarm-controlled resource hub on the edge of Alliance space. Intelligence suggested it was a critical node for the swarm's supply chain, and its destruction would deal a significant blow to their operations. The attack was swift and brutal. Alaric's fleet descended on the hub like a storm, their coordinated strikes overwhelming the swarm's defenses. The Myrmidon drones fought fiercely, but the combined ingenuity of the task force proved too much. Kalen's precision piloting, Dran's improvised explosives, and Orin's tactical brilliance turned the tide of the battle. As the hub erupted in a fiery explosion, the crew of the Resolute cheered. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. In the aftermath, Alaric addressed the fleet via holocom. His voice carried the weight of their shared determination. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The Myrmidon swarm thinks they can divide us, weaken us, but we've shown them that we won't back down. We fight not just for our survival, but for the survival of the galaxy." The fleet's response was a resounding cheer, their voices echoing across the stars. But as Alaric watched the flames of the destroyed hub fade into the void, his resolve hardened further. The Alliance's hesitation had forced them into this desperate fight, and the weight of their mission rested squarely on his shoulders. The Myrmidon swarm would not stop, but neither would he. Deathworld Gambit. The Resolute hung in orbit above the desolate Deathworld of Korath's Maw once again, its darkened hull a reflection of the dangerous mission about to unfold. Commander Alaric Dane stood at the helm, his cybernetic eye scanning the holographic map of their next objective. The atmosphere aboard the ship was tense. The crew knew what was at stake. "Commander," Lieutenant Orin Voss said, his translucent form shimmering under the dim lights of the bridge. "The fleet has mobilized. They're ready for the next strike." Alaric nodded. "Good. We'll need every advantage we can get. The Myrmidon swarm won't take this lightly." This time, their target wasn't a simple supply hub or colony. It was a heavily fortified swarm stronghold deep in the treacherous expanse of a newly discovered Deathworld. The world, named Abyssal Chasm, was as hostile as its name suggested. Its atmosphere was thick with toxins, its surface ravaged by unending storms and volcanic eruptions. Worse, it was crawling with Myrmidon drones that thrived in the chaos. Alaric addressed the gathered fleet over holocom, his tone steady but commanding. "We've struck a blow against the swarm, but they won't stop. Abyssal Chasm isn't just another base. It's a breeding ground for their newest weapons. If we destroy it, we cripple their ability to adapt. This will be dangerous. Some of us won't make it back. But if we succeed, we buy the galaxy a chance to fight back." The fleet responded with a chorus of affirmations. These were volunteers, individuals who had lost everything to the swarm and had nothing left to lose. Their resolve was unshakable. The descent to Abyssal Chasm was a nightmare. Violent storms buffeted the dropships, and lightning danced through the thick clouds like angry spirits. Alaric and his team were aboard the lead dropship, its hull groaning under the strain of the planet's chaotic atmosphere. "Stay steady," Alaric barked to the pilot, a young human named Sarah Kane. Her hands gripped the controls tightly, sweat beading on her forehead. "I've got it, Commander," she replied, her voice tense but focused. When they finally broke through the storm clouds, the surface below was a vision of hell. Rivers of molten rock snaked through jagged cliffs, while massive geysers erupted with superheated steam. In the distance, the swarm's stronghold loomed like a grotesque monument, its organic metallic structure pulsating with an eerie green light. "Touchdown in 2 minutes," Sarah announced. Alaric turned to his team. "You know the drill. Stick together, cover each other, and don't stop moving. Our objective is the core reactor. Plant the charges and get out. Clear." A chorus of "Yes, sir," echoed through the cabin. The team disembarked into a landscape that felt alive with hostility. The air was thick and acrid, their advanced suits working overtime to filter out the toxins. The ground trembled beneath their boots as the planet's unstable tectonics made their presence known. Miraidon patrols, Orin whispered, his translucent hands pointing to a group of drones moving in synchronized precision along a nearby ridge. "Take them out quietly," Alaric ordered, gesturing to Callan Rin, the Malgaran pilot who had proven her worth in their previous mission. Her crystalline wings shimmered faintly as she unsheathed a pair of energy blades. Callan moved like a shadow, dispatching the drones with lethal efficiency. The team pressed forward, their path marked by treacherous terrain and the ever-present threat of discovery. As they neared the stronghold, the scale of the swarm's operations became evident. Massive bioengineered constructs moved about the facility, their grotesque forms a testament to the swarm's twisted ingenuity. Pools of luminescent liquid dotted the area, filled with embryonic forms of new Miraidon drones. "This is worse than we thought," Dran rumbled, his hulking form hunched behind a jagged boulder. "They're building an army." "Then we make sure they never finish it," Alaric replied, his voice cold with determination. The infiltration of the stronghold was a grueling test of skill and resolve. The team encountered wave after wave of Miraidon resistance, each engagement more brutal than the last. The swarm's drones were relentless, their hive-mind coordination making them formidable opponents. Despite the odds, Alaric's team pressed on. Dran used his engineering expertise to bypass security systems, while Layla coordinated the fleet's orbital strikes to provide cover. Kalen's agility and precision kept them one step ahead of the swarm's counterattacks. When they finally reached the core reactor, the sight was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. The massive structure pulsed with a sickly green light, its energy feeding the entire facility. Surrounding it were dozens of pods, each containing partially formed drones that writhed and twitched as if sensing the intruders. "Set the charges," Alaric ordered, his cybernetic eye scanning the area for threats. As the team worked, the swarm responded with fury. Drones poured into the chamber, their chittering cries echoing off the walls. Alaric and his team fought desperately to hold them off, their weapons blazing in the dim light of the reactor. "We're almost done," Layla shouted over the comms, her voice strained. "Keep them off us," Alaric barked, his cybernetic arm deploying an energy shield to deflect an incoming barrage. With the charges set, the team began their harrowing escape. The facility's self-defense mechanisms activated, flooding the corridors with lethal traps and drones. The team moved as one, their training and camaraderie pushing them through the chaos. When they finally reached the extraction point, their dropship was already under siege. Sarah Kane fought to keep the craft steady, its turrets firing relentlessly at the encroaching swarm. "Go, go, go!" Alaric shouted, covering his team as they boarded the dropship. The moment the last team member was aboard, Sarah pulled the ship into the air, dodging enemy fire as they ascended. Below, the charges detonated, a chain reaction of explosions ripping through the stronghold. The resulting blast lit up the dark skies of Abyssal Chasm, a beacon of defiance against the swarm. Back aboard the Resolute, the crew celebrated their victory, though the cost of the mission weighed heavily on their minds. Several ships in the fleet had suffered significant losses, and the horrors they had witnessed on Abyssal Chasm left an indelible mark. Alaric stood in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The destruction of the stronghold was a step forward, but the war was far from over. The swarm would retaliate, and the Alliance's indecision remained a looming threat. Orin approached, his translucent form reflecting the starlight. "We made a difference today, Commander." Alaric nodded, his cybernetic eye glinting. "We did, but this was just one battle. The swarm won't stop, and neither will we." Breaking the hive. The Resolute hovered in the depths of space, surrounded by the Galactic fleet that had become the heart of the resistance against the Myrmidon swarm. Victory on Abyssal Chasm had bolstered their resolve, but the sense of impending retaliation loomed over them like a dark shadow. Commander Alaric Dane stood in the war room, staring at a holographic projection of their next objective, the Myrmidon hive mind's central node. "This is it," Alaric said, his voice firm. "The heart of the swarm. If we take it out, their entire network collapses." The room was filled with his most trusted officers and key allies: Orin Voss, the ever-loyal strategist; Callan Rin, their daring Malgaran pilot; Dran, the resourceful Garruk engineer; and Layla Grant, the ship's sharp-eyed communications officer. Each of them knew the stakes. The intel from Abyssal Chasm confirms the hive mind node's location, Layla explained, gesturing to the hologram. "It's deep within the Argus Nebula, heavily fortified and surrounded by a fleet of Myrmidon ships." Kaelin leaned forward, her crystalline wings catching the dim light. A direct assault would be suicide. "We need a way to bypass their defenses." Fran grunted in agreement. "Their fleet will tear us apart before we even get close." Alaric's cybernetic eye glinted as he spoke. "We're not going to attack head-on. We'll use the nebula's chaotic energy fields to mask our approach. Once inside, we'll deploy a strike team to disable their defenses from within." "Commander," Orin said cautiously, "the swarm won't let us get that close without a fight. Even if we make it to the hive node, the odds of success are minimal." Alaric interrupted, finishing the thought. "I know, but if we don't take this risk, the swarm will consume us all." The journey to the Argus Nebula was fraught with tension. The nebula's swirling energy fields wreaked havoc on the fleet's systems, forcing the ships to navigate carefully. The Resolute led the charge, its advanced sensors and shields barely holding against the nebula's chaotic environment. As they approached the hive node, the scale of the Myrmidon stronghold became clear. The massive structure pulsed with an unnatural light, its organic metallic form a grotesque amalgamation of alien design. Surrounding it was a formidable fleet of Myrmidon ships, their sleek insectoid shapes bristling with weaponry. "Activate cloaking protocols," Alaric ordered. "We're going dark." The fleet's ships vanished into the nebula's dense energy fields, their movements masked by the swirling chaos. Alaric's heart pounded as he watched the holographic display. Every second brought them closer to discovery. The first strike came as they entered the hive node's perimeter. Myrmidon ships detected faint energy signatures and swarmed toward the fleet's position. Alaric gave the order to engage, and the battle erupted in a blaze of light and fury. Kaelin led the charge in her fighter squadron, her crystalline wings flashing as she darted through enemy lines. Dran coordinated the fleet's defensive measures, his deep voice booming over the comms as he issued commands. "Focus fire on their carriers," Alaric shouted. "We need to clear a path to the hive node." The Resolute unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, its advanced weaponry carving through the swarm's ranks. Despite the resistance, the fleet pushed forward, inching closer to their target. The strike team deployed near the hive node's central structure, their dropship weaving through a storm of enemy fire. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Alaric led his team onto the alien stronghold. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the walls pulsed with a sickly green light. "Stay sharp," Alaric warned. "The swarm will throw everything they have at us." The corridors were a labyrinth of organic growths and metallic constructs. Myrmidon drones emerged from the shadows, their chittering cries echoing through the halls. The team moved with precision, their weapons cutting down the relentless attackers. Layla worked quickly to disable the hive's internal defenses, her fingers flying across her datavat. "I'm almost through," she said, her voice tense. "Just a few more seconds." A massive Miradum drone burst through the wall, its razor-sharp limbs slashing at the team. Alaric stepped forward, his cybernetic arm deploying an energy shield to block the attack. With a swift motion, he drove his blade into the creature's carapace, taking it down. "Let's move," he barked, helping Layla to her feet. The core of the hive node was a sight of both awe and horror. A massive pulsating structure dominated the chamber, its tendrils extending into the walls like veins feeding a living organism. The hive mind's consciousness emanated from it, an oppressive presence that bore down on the team. "This is it," Alaric said, his voice steady. "Plant the charges." As the team worked, the hive mind responded. Miradum drones poured into the chamber, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Alaric fought with cold precision, his cybernetic arm and eye enhancing his reflexes as he held the line. "Charges are set," Layla shouted. "Detonate on my mark," Alaric ordered, his gaze fixed on the core. "Everyone, fall back." The team retreated toward the extraction point, fighting every step of the way. The hive mind's fury was palpable, its drones swarming with relentless determination. When they reached the dropship, Alaric stayed behind, his cybernetic systems interfacing with the hive's controls. "Go," he shouted to his team. "I'll finish this." "Commander." "No," Orin protested. "That's an order," Alaric growled, his voice brooking no argument. The dropship lifted off, the team watching in stunned silence as Alaric faced the hive mind alone. His systems overloaded as he poured everything into disrupting the swarm's network, his cold rage fueling his every action. With a final surge of energy, the charges detonated, the core erupting in a blinding explosion. The hive mind's consciousness shattered, and the Miradum swarm collapsed in disarray. The Resolute and the Fleet emerged from the Argus Nebula victorious, their battered ships a testament to their resilience. Alaric's sacrifice had turned the tide, but his absence left a void that weighed heavily on his crew. As the fleet regrouped, Orin addressed the survivors. "Commander Dane showed us what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves. His cold rage wasn't just anger, it was the fire that kept us alive. We owe it to him to finish what we started." The galaxy was free from the swarm, but the memory of Alaric Dane burned bright, a symbol of humanity's ingenuity, resilience, and determination.